"I think you need a hug," said the vampire king's daughter to the woman the world had forgotten. She didn't know that hug would awaken an ancient prophecy and bind 3 souls across the chasm between light and darkness. The snow had begun to fall again, delicate and relentless, blanketing the cobblestones of Nordhaven's merchant quarter in silver-white silence. It settled atop the iron railings outside Moonfall Marriage Hall and dusted the shoulders of nobles arriving in gilded carriages. Through towering stained-glass windows, golden light poured onto the frost-covered steps, shimmering like liquid amber. Somewhere within, a string quartet began to play, the melody drifting through the winter air. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. From the courtyard gardens, the scent of spiced wine, roasted chestnuts, and honeyed pastries wafted into the night. Laughter echoed from behind the grand doors. Toasts, celebrations, the clinking of crystal. There was music, warmth, and belonging all around. But not for her. Alara Wynne sat collapsed on the frozen stone steps beneath the hall's towering entrance. Her dress, once modest and clean, was now torn at the hem and stained with mud. Her feet were bare, pale against the snow, her shoes lost somewhere in her desperate flight through the city. A tattered satchel lay beside her, its strap frayed and knotted. Her hands, raw from cold and exhaustion, clutched a small cloth bundle, the only thing she'd saved from the fire. Inside it, a charred sprig of nightshade, her mother's favorite herb. She whispered to the night, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry, Mama. I tried to save it all." A tear slipped down her cheek, freezing halfway. She wiped it away quickly, but more followed. Her auburn hair fell across her face in tangled waves, revealing hollow cheeks and eyes too weary for someone barely past 20 winters. She pressed the bundle to her chest and let herself cry, something she hadn't allowed in weeks, maybe months. Footsteps crunched softly through the snow nearby. Lord Cale Shadowbane approached with silent, predatory grace. He wore a long black coat embroidered with silver thread, his silver hair tied back, and his crimson eyes glowing faintly beneath the moonlight. Tall and composed, he moved like a shadow given form, regal, dangerous, unreadable. But his face, though striking, carried something deeper, something ancient and worn beneath the surface. His daughter, Lyric, skipped beside him in a crimson velvet coat, her tiny boots leaving soft prints in the snow. Her cheeks were rosy, her blonde hair braided with red ribbon, and her eyes, far too knowing for a child, sparkled with curiosity. As they reached the base of the steps, Cale's gaze fell on the figure huddled near the doors. Instinctively, his hand moved to Lyric's shoulder. "Stay beside me," he murmured, his voice low and firm. But Lyric stopped walking. She stared up at the woman sitting alone in the snow, her head tilting slightly, as if listening to something only she could hear. "Papa," she said softly. "That lady's heart is crying." Cale's jaw tightened. "Lyric, come. We're expected inside." But the Lyrics didn't move. She slipped her small hand out of his gloved one. "Lyric," he said quietly, warningly. Before he could reach for her, she was already walking toward the woman. Cale froze, his breath misting in the cold. His daughter's crimson coat stood out against the white snow as she climbed the steps with careful determination. Lyric paused in front of Alara. The woman hadn't noticed her yet until she did. Alara looked up, startled, her tear-streaked face pale in the moonlight. A small child stood before her, snowflakes clinging to her hair, eyes round and impossibly kind. She stared at Alara not with fear or disgust, but with something ancient and gentle, as if she saw not a stranger, but someone worth knowing. Alara's throat tightened. Lyrics took one step closer. She opened her arms, small and deliberate, as if offering something sacred. "I think," Lyrics said softly, her voice carrying through the snow-hushed night, "you need a hug." Alara blinked, her breath catching. She hadn't been touched kindly in so long, hadn't been seen, hadn't been safe. And now this small child, without question or judgment, was reaching for her. Kale stood back, his entire body tense, watching in stunned silence. His hand hovered near the hilt of the blade at his side, though he didn't draw it. Something about the scene held him frozen. Alara looked down at her trembling hands, then back up at the child. Her voice came out broken, barely a whisper. "Why?" she breathed. "Why would you want to touch someone like me?" Lyric tilted her head, mittened hands still open. "Because," she said simply, "your heart looks like it hurts." Alara's lips parted. A sob broke free. And Lyric didn't wait. She stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around Alara's hunched shoulders. It was soft, warm, slightly awkward, but it was real. It was whole. It didn't come from pity or obligation. It came from a place Alara thought no longer existed in the world. Alara froze at first, her body stiff with disbelief. Then slowly, so slowly, she leaned into the embrace. Her chin dropped to the little girl's shoulder. Her shaking hands lifted, hovered in midair, then clutched Lyric's back with careful desperation. The dam inside her shattered. And as Alara wept into the arms of a child she didn't know, something ancient stirred in the shadows behind them. Lord Kale Shadowbane took one step forward, his crimson eyes fixed on the woman trembling in his daughter's embrace. For the first time in centuries, he felt it, a pulse of warmth, a flicker of light he thought had been extinguished from the world long ago. The prophecy whispered through his mind, unbidden. From ash and sorrow shall rise the heart of light. He moved forward silently, removing his crimson cloak. Without a word, he draped it over Alara's bare shoulders. She looked up, startled, meeting his glowing gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Kale's voice, low and ancient, broke the silence. "You're freezing," he said simply. "Come inside." Alara Wynn had not always been this, hollow, hunted, and invisible. Once, she had been the daughter of the most respected herbalist in the southern provinces, raised in a cottage filled with drying lavender and the scent of medicinal brews. Her mother had taught her the names of every plant, every root, every remedy. Her father had called her his little alchemist. But that life had burned, and with it, everything she loved. Alara stared up at Lord Kale Shadowbane, the crimson cloak heavy and warm across her trembling shoulders. His face was pale as moonlight, his features sharp and aristocratic, but his eyes, those glowing crimson eyes, held none of the cruelty the legends promised. Instead, they studied her with something closer to curiosity, perhaps even a concern. "What brings you to these steps alone?" His voice was low, controlled, almost gentle. "In weather like this, most seek shelter." Alara's throat tightened. She looked away, shame flooding through her. "I have nowhere else to go." The answer was vague, defensive. She felt his gaze linger on her, weighing the truth she refused to speak. Kale tilted his head slightly. "Nowhere at all." "Nowhere," she whispered, clutching the charred bundle tighter against her chest. For a moment, he said nothing. Then something shifted in his expression, a flicker of recognition, though not of her face. His eyes narrowed slightly, focusing on the air around her, as if seeing something she could not. A faint shimmer, golden, barely there. His breath stilled. "Impossible." "Papa," Lyric's small voice broke the silence. She tugged on Kale's coat, her mittened hand insistent. "She's so cold. Can she come inside? Please?" Kale's jaw tightened. "Lyric, please, Papa." The child's eyes were wide, pleading, "Just to get warm." Alara shook her head quickly, her voice cracking. "No. I shouldn't. I don't belong." "You belong where kindness is," Lyric said firmly, as if the matter were already decided. She reached for Alara's hand and tugged gently. "Come on." Kale's crimson gaze flicked between his daughter and the woman wrapped in his cloak. He exhaled slowly, the mist of his breath curling into the night. "Very well," he said at last, his tone resigned. "But stay close to me." The warmth inside Moonfall Marriage Hall was overwhelming. Alara stepped through the grand doors and was immediately engulfed by golden light, the scent of perfumed candles, and the hum of conversation. Chandeliers dripped with crystal, casting prismatic patterns across polished marble floors. Noble women in silk gowns glided past, their laughter soft and musical. Men in embroidered coats raised glasses of amber wine. And then they saw her. The whispers began almost immediately. Who is that? Why is she barefoot? Is that Lord Shadowbane's cloak? Alara felt every gaze like a blade. She pulled the crimson fabric tighter around herself, trying to disappear, trying to shrink into the folds of the cloak. Her bare feet left faint, wet prints on the pristine floor. Lyric held her hand the entire time, her small fingers warm and unyielding. The child walked with her head high, as if daring anyone to speak against the woman at her side. Kale moved beside them, his presence alone enough to part the crowd. Nobles bowed slightly as he passed, but their eyes lingered on Alara with suspicion, confusion, and thinly veiled disdain. A woman in a sapphire gown leaned toward her companion. Why would he bring someone like that inside? Alara's cheeks burned. She tried to pull her hand away from Lyric's, but the child only gripped tighter. Kale's voice cut through the murmurs, calm but edged with authority. She is a guest. The whispers stopped. No one dared speak further. He led them toward the far side of the hall, where a roaring fireplace bathed the room in flickering warmth. Lyric guided Alara to a cushioned bench near the hearth and sat beside her, still holding her hand. Alara stared at the flames, her body trembling, not just from the cold now, but from the weight of shame, exhaustion, and disbelief. She didn't belong here. She was a stain on this golden world. Kale stood a few paces away, his arms crossed, watching her carefully. He saw the way she hunched her shoulders, the way she avoided looking at anyone, the way she seemed to be trying to fold into herself and vanish. Humility, survival, fear. And yet, despite it all, his daughter clung to her as if she were precious. A shadow approached from the corner of the hall, a tall figure in black armor, a vampire guard with silver hair and eyes like frozen steel. He stopped before Kale and inclined his head. "My lord," the guard said quietly, his gaze flicking toward Alara. "Forgive the intrusion, but is that woman a Wynn?" Kale's eyes sharpened. "What of it?" The guard hesitated, his expression darkening. The Wynn apothecary clan was accused of heretical practices. Their estate burned 3 winters ago. There were suspicions. Alara went rigid. Her heart slammed against her ribs. The guard's voice lowered. "If she is one of them, enough." Kale's tone was ice. He stepped forward, placing himself between the guard and Alara. "She is under my protection. If you have concerns, you may voice them to me in private. Not here." The guard's jaw tightened, but he bowed his head. "As you command, my lord." He retreated into the crowd, but Alara felt his gaze lingering. She lowered her head, her breath shallow. They knew. Of course they knew. Her name was poison. Her family's name was ruined. Kale turned back to her, his expression unreadable. For a moment, she thought he might demand answers, might force her to explain the fire, the accusations, the night she lost everything. But he didn't. Instead, he crouched slightly, bringing himself to her eye level. His voice was quiet, meant only for her. "You are safe here," he said simply. "No one will harm you while I stand witness." Alara's eyes burned with unshed tears. She didn't understand why he was protecting her, why his daughter had chosen her. Why does any of this happen? Kale rose and glanced toward the hall's entrance. "This place is too loud for you," he said. "Too many eyes." He extended a gloved hand toward her, steady and sure. "Come. I know somewhere warm and safe, somewhere you can rest." Alara stared at his hand. Her instincts screamed at her to refuse, to run, to disappear back into the snow where she belonged. But Lyric squeezed her other hand gently, her voice soft. "It's okay. Papa keeps his promises." Alara looked up at Kale, at the vampire king whose legends painted him as a monster. But the man before her was calm, patient, and impossibly steady. She didn't understand the pull she felt toward him, didn't understand why his presence, despite everything, made her feel less alone. Slowly, trembling, she placed her hand in his. "All right," she whispered. Kale's fingers closed gently around hers. "Then let's go." And as he led her toward the hall's side exit, Lyric skipping between them, Alara felt the weight of 100 watching eyes, but for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to carry it alone. The carriage waiting outside the hall was unlike anything Alara had ever seen. It was carved from black wood so polished it gleamed like obsidian, its surface etched with silver runes that pulsed faintly in the moonlight. The horses, if they could be called that, were midnight dark creatures with eyes that glowed pale blue, their breath misting like smoke. No driver sat at the reins. The carriage moved of its own accord, as if guided by something unseen. Alara hesitated at the door, her bare feet sinking into the snow. Kale stepped up first, then turned and offered his hand once more. "It's warded against the cold," he said. "You'll be comfortable inside." Lyric was already climbing in, her crimson coat flaring as she scrambled onto the velvet bench. "Come on. It's so warm here." Alara glanced at Kale, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. He waited, patient, his hand steady. She took it. The moment she stepped inside, warmth enveloped her like a blanket. The interior was lined with deep burgundy velvet, the seats cushioned and impossibly soft. Lanterns hung from silver chains, their flames flickering without smoke. The air smelled faintly of cedar and night-blooming jasmine. Alara sank onto the bench across from Kale, pulling his cloak tighter around her shoulders. Lyric immediately nestled beside her, kicking her little boots happily. The carriage began to move, gliding soundlessly over the cobblestones. "Do you like it?" Lyric asked, her eyes bright. "Papa's carriage is magic. It never gets stuck in the snow, and it knows where to go all by itself." Alara managed a faint smile. "It's beautiful. Wait until you see the castle." Lyric continued, her voice bubbling with excitement. "There are towers that touch the clouds, and the library has books that glow in the dark, and the gardens have flowers that only bloom at midnight. Oh, and there's a room full of mirrors that show you things that aren't there yet. Papa says I'm not allowed in that one, but I peeked once." Kale's voice was dry. "And you will not peek again." Lyric grinned mischievously, but said nothing. Alara watched the child with something close to wonder. How could someone so small, so innocent, belong to a world as dark as this? Outside, the city slipped past, shops shuttered for the night, street lamps flickering, snow falling in steady silence. The carriage moved through the narrow streets and out toward the northern road, where the lights grew fewer and the forest thickened. Alara's gaze drifted to the window. Her reflection stared back, pale, hollow-eyed, wrapped in a crimson cloak that didn't belong to her. "They said we practiced dark magic," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "That we poison the wells, that we curse the crops." Kale's eyes shifted to her, but he said nothing. Alara's hands trembled in her lap. None of it was true. "My mother was a healer. My father grew herbs for medicine. We helped people. We saved people." Her voice cracked. "But when the fire came, when everything burned, they said it was our fault. They said we summoned it. They hunted us." She closed her eyes, the memories clawing at her, running through smoke. Her mother's screams, the heat of flames licking at her back, the faces of neighbors she'd known all her life, twisted with fear and rage. "I ran," she whispered. "I ran, and I didn't stop. Not until there was nowhere left to run." Kale's gaze remained steady on her, his expression unreadable. But he was listening, truly listening, piecing together the fragments of her confession, the truth buried beneath the fear. "You were innocent," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. Alara looked up at him, startled. "How do you?" A sudden jolt rattled the carriage. The lanterns flickered. The air grew thick, charged with something unseen. Alara gasped as a strange warmth bloomed in her chest, sharp, unfamiliar, almost painful. Kale's eyes narrowed. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze fixed on her. "What are you feeling?" "I don't. Elara pressed a hand to her sternum, her breath quickening. I don't know. It's like something's waking up. The runes on the carriage walls flared brighter, reacting to the energy radiating from her. A faint golden shimmer rippled across her skin, barely visible but unmistakable. Kale's expression shifted. Recognition, realization, something almost like awe. Breathe, he said, his voice calm, grounding. Whatever you're feeling, don't fight it. Let it settle. What's happening to me? Alara's voice trembled with panic. You're safe, Kale said firmly. I promise you're safe. Just breathe. Lyric reached for Alara's hand, her small fingers curling around hers. It's okay, the child whispered. Papa won't let anything bad happen. Slowly, the warmth in Alara's chest ebbed. The golden shimmer faded. The lantern steadied. Kale sat back, his gaze still locked on her. He said nothing, but something had changed in the way he looked at her. Something deeper, more intent. Alara swallowed hard, her heart still racing. What was that? Something old, Kale murmured. Something I haven't seen in a very long time. Before she could ask what he meant, the carriage slowed. Lyric pressed her face to the window. We're here. Alara turned, and her breath caught. Rising before them was the Shadowbane stronghold. It was a fortress carved from black stone, its towers spiraling upward like skeletal fingers reaching for the sky. Blue fire burned in iron braziers along the walls, casting eerie, flickering shadows across the snow. Gargoyles perched along the battlements, their eyes glowing faintly. The gates were massive, forged from iron and inscribed with ancient runes. It was beautiful, terrifying, otherworldly. The carriage passed through the gates, and Alara saw them. Vampire guards in dark armor, their eyes glowing crimson or silver, their movements too graceful to be human. They bowed deeply as the carriage rolled past, but their gazes lingered on Alara with suspicion, curiosity, and something sharper. Fear. The carriage stopped before the main entrance. Kale stepped out first, then turned and extended his hand. Alara took it, her legs unsteady as she descended onto the frost-covered courtyard. The guards watched in silence. Kale's voice rang out, clear and commanding. This woman is my guest. She will be treated with respect and care. Anyone who questions this answers to me. The guards bowed their heads immediately, but Alara felt their stares like cold steel. Lyric grabbed Alara's hand and tugged her forward. Come on, you have to see inside. The grand doors opened, and Alara stepped into the entrance hall. Her breath left her. The space was vast, cathedral-like, with vaulted ceilings supported by marble pillars carved with twisting vines and serpents. A grand staircase split in two directions, its railings inlaid with silver. Chandeliers made of iron and crystal hung overhead, their light soft and ghostly. Tapestries depicting ancient battles and forgotten kings adorned the walls. It was breathtaking, beautiful, and utterly overwhelming. Alara stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. Kale stepped beside her, his voice low. Welcome to Shadowbane. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and wonder. I don't belong here, she whispered. Kale's gaze softened, just slightly. Perhaps. But you're here nonetheless. And as Lyric pulled her deeper into the castle, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that crossing this threshold had changed everything. The attendants were gentle, but their whispers were not. Alara sat in a marble bath filled with steaming water scented with lavender and rose petals, her body finally beginning to thaw. Two vampire women moved around her with practiced efficiency, one combing the tangles from her hair, the other laying out fresh clothes on a nearby chair. Their movements were graceful, almost ethereal, but their voices carried through the chamber in hushed tones. Why would Lord Kale bring a human here? She's no ordinary human. Look at her, she's a win. The cursed clan? The ones who burned. Hush. He'll hear you. Alara closed her eyes, sinking lower into the water. She wanted to disappear beneath the surface, to drown out their voices, to forget that she was the subject of their suspicion. When they finished, she was dressed in a soft gray gown with silver embroidery along the sleeves. It was too fine, too elegant. She didn't recognize the woman staring back at her in the mirror, clean, draped in silk, her hair falling in damp waves over her shoulders. She looked almost human again, but she didn't feel it. Lyric found her soon after, bouncing into the chamber with infectious energy. Alara, come on, I want to show you everything. Before Alara could protest, the child grabbed her hand and pulled her into the corridor. The citadel was a labyrinth of vaulted hallways, spiraling staircases, and rooms that seemed to breathe with ancient memory. Lyric led her past the grand library, where shelves stretched 3 stories high and books floated gently through the air. They passed the portrait gallery, where the eyes of long-dead lords seemed to follow Alara as she walked. They climbed to the observatory, where a massive telescope pointed toward the star-filled sky. This is where Papa studies the heavens, Lyric said proudly. He says the stars remember things people forget. Alara paused at the stone railing overlooking the courtyard below. The view was breathtaking, the sprawling grounds dusted with snow, the blue fires flickering along the walls, the forest stretching endlessly into the night. She placed her hand on the railing to steady herself, and the stone began to glow. Alara gasped and jerked her hand back. Beneath where her palm had rested, a faint golden rune pulsed once, twice, then faded. Lyric's eyes widened with delight. Whoa! It likes you. What was that? Alara stammered, staring at her hand as if it had betrayed her. The runes, Lyric said matter-of-factly. They're supposed to protect the castle, but they only glow for people with magic. I don't have magic, Alara whispered, her voice shaking. Lyric tilted her head, puzzled. Then why did it glow? Alara had no answer. As they continued through the citadel, Alara began to notice other things. The shadows in the corridors seemed to soften as she passed, retreating gently into the corners. The torches along the walls burned brighter, their flames flickering with warmth rather than cold blue light. Even the air felt different around her, calmer, lighter. The castle itself was responding to her presence, and she had no idea why. In a chamber deep within the fortress, the elder vampires convened in secret. 6 figures sat around a circular table carved from black stone, their faces half hidden in shadow. They spoke in low, urgent tones. She carries the mark of the luminary line, one said, his voice gravelly with age. I sensed it the moment she entered. Impossible, another hissed. That bloodline was extinguished centuries ago. And yet here she is. Glowing runes, calming shadows. The castle itself bends to her presence. She is a threat, or an opportunity. Lord Kale is playing a dangerous game. If the other courts learn we harbor a luminary, they will come for her, and for us. Silence fell over the table. One of the elders leaned forward, his crimson eyes gleaming. Then we must act before they do. Kale found Alara in the library that evening, standing before a towering window that overlooked the moonlit mountains. She looked small against the vastness of the room, her gray gown nearly blending into the shadows. He approached quietly, his footsteps soundless. You've been exploring. Alara turned, startled. Lyric insisted. She does that. A faint smile touched his lips, then faded. May I speak with you? She nodded, though wariness flickered in her eyes. Kale gestured toward a pair of chairs near the fireplace. They sat, the flames casting dancing light across their faces. There's something you need to understand, Kale began, his voice measured. The aura you carry, the energy I sensed in the carriage, it's not ordinary. Alara's hands tightened in her lap. I don't know what you're talking about. You do, Kale said gently. You felt it, the warmth in your chest, the way the runes responded to your touch. She looked away. That doesn't mean anything. It means everything. Kale leaned forward slightly. Your aura resembles something I thought lost to history. The luminary bloodline, humans capable of healing vampiric corruption, of calming the darkness that festers within us. They were rare, revered, and hunted to extinction. Alara shook her head, her voice rising. No. You're wrong. I'm nobody. I'm broken, cursed. My family is dead because of me. I bring ruin, not healing. You bring light, Kale countered, his tone firm but not unkind. Whether you accept it or not. Tears pricked at Alara's eyes. I don't want this. I didn't ask for any of this. Few of us ask for our destiny, Kale said quietly. But that doesn't make it any less real. She looked at him, her expression raw with pain. I'm not special. I'm just broken. Kale held her gaze, and for a moment, something ancient and sorrowful flickered in his crimson eyes. Broken things, he said softly, may reflect the brightest light. Alara's breath caught. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how to reconcile the weight of his words with the hollow emptiness she'd carried for so long. Kale rose from his chair, his expression unreadable once more. Rest. Tomorrow will bring more questions. But for tonight, you're safe. He left without another word, his dark coat sweeping behind him. Alara sat alone by the fire, her mind spinning. High above, on a shadowed balcony overlooking the library, a figure stood watching. Cloaked in darkness, their face hidden, they observed Alara through narrowed eyes. Their fingers drummed slowly against the stone railing, calculating, considering. So, they murmured to the night. The luminary returns. A cold smile curved their lips. How unfortunate for her. The figure turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving only the faint echo of footsteps behind. Alara couldn't sleep. The bed was too soft, the silence too deep, the weight of everything pressing down on her chest until she could hardly breathe. She slipped from beneath the heavy blankets and padded barefoot across the cold stone floor, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders. The library called to her. She found her way back through the winding corridors, guided by flickering torchlight and instinct. The massive doors stood ajar, as if waiting. Inside, the shelves stretched endlessly upward, and the air smelled of parchment, dust, and something older. Magic, perhaps, or simply time. Alara moved between the rows, her fingers trailing along leather spines. She wasn't sure what she was looking for until she found it. A section tucked into a far corner, marked by a small bronze plaque, Histories of the Forgotten. Her breath caught. She pulled a scroll from the shelf, its edges yellowed and fragile. As she unrolled it carefully on a nearby table, her eyes widened. The luminary bloodline, healers of shadow and flame. Her hands trembled as she read. The luminaries were born of light, descended from an ancient pact between the first humans and the celestial guardians. Their gift was singular, to heal the corruption that festers within vampiric blood, to calm the madness that comes with immortality, to bridge the divide between darkness and dawn. They were hunted, fears, coveted, and in the Age of Ash, they were believed extinguished entirely. Alara's vision blurred. She turned the scroll over, finding another passage. A prophecy was spoken in the final days of the Luminary Queen. From ash and sorrow shall rise the heart of light, to calm the blood of the night, and awaken the child born of dawn. She will come broken, unmarked, and the world will not know her. But the shadows will remember. Her breath left her in a rush. Ash and sorrow. Broken and unmarked. It's you. Alara spun around. Kale stood in the doorway, his crimson eyes glowing softly in the dim light. He moved toward her with that same silent grace, stopping a few paces away. How long have you known? She whispered. Since the moment I saw you, Kale said quietly. Since the runes glowed beneath your hand. Since the castle itself began to soften in your presence. He gestured to the scroll. You've found the prophecy. This doesn't mean anything, Alara said, shaking her head. Prophecies are just words. Old words. They mean everything to us. Kale interrupted gently. For centuries, we've waited. Watched. Hoped that the luminary line had not truly died. Why? Alara's voice cracked. Why does it matter? Kale's expression darkened. Because without the luminaries, vampires are doomed to slow corruption. Our bloodlines weaken. Madness spreads. The darkness consumes us from within. He paused. You are the light we thought lost. Alara stepped back, her shoulders hitting the bookshelf. I can't be. I'm no one. I'm just The library doors burst open. Lyric tumbled in, her nightgown trailing behind her, her blonde hair tousled from sleep. Alara. She ran straight to her, wrapping her arms around Alara's waist. I felt you were sad. Are you sad? Alara's throat tightened. She knelt down, brushing the child's hair back. I'm all right, little one. What are you doing awake? I woke up, Lyric said simply. And I knew you needed me. Kale watched them, something unreadable flickering across his face. Lyric, you should be in bed. But she needs me, Lyric insisted, not letting go of Alara. Kale sighed softly. 5 more minutes. Then I'm carrying you back myself. Lyric grinned triumphantly and settled against Alara's side. That night, Alara finally slept, but the dreams came. Fire. Everywhere, fire. She stood in the ruins of her family's cottage, flames licking at the walls, smoke choking the air. But this time she saw more. A figure in the shadows. A man cloaked in black, his hand raised, silver runes glowing along his fingers. He was speaking, chanting. The fire wasn't natural. It was summoned. And then the vision shifted. She stood in a circle of light, surrounded by towering figures, women in white robes, their faces obscured, their voices harmonizing in a language she didn't understand. One stepped forward, placing a hand over Alara's heart. You carry our legacy, the woman whispered. Do not fear the fire. It cannot consume what is already reborn. Alara gasped and woke, her heart pounding, sweat soaking through her nightgown. The room was dark, silent, but the woman's voice still echoed in her mind. The next morning, Kale was summoned to the council chamber. He stood before the long table where the elder vampires sat in judgment. Their faces were stone, their voices cold. You cannot keep her here, one said bluntly. The girl is a threat. She is a guest, Kale replied evenly. She is a luminary, another hissed. If the southern courts discover her presence, they will come for her. And for us. Then let them come. The room fell silent. The eldest vampire leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. You would risk war for a human? Kale's gaze didn't waver. I would risk war for what is right. She is dangerous, my lord. Her very existence disrupts the balance. Or restore it. Kale's voice hardened. This council does not dictate who I shelter within my walls. Alara wins stays. And anyone who challenges that answer to me. The elders exchanged glances. None dared speak further. Kale turned and left without waiting for dismissal. Later that day, Alara sat in the observatory, staring out at the snow-covered mountains. Kale found her there, his expression thoughtful. I had a dream, she said before he could speak. I saw the fire. The night my family died. She turned to him, her eyes fierce. It wasn't an accident. Someone said it. Someone wanted us dead. Kale's jaw tightened. Do you know who? A man in black. A vampire, I think. He used magic, runes. Her voice trembled. He was hunting us. Hunting me. Kale's eyes darkened with understanding. The Purge. There were factions who believed the luminaries were a threat. They hunted them systematically. Then my family died because of what I am. Alara's hands clenched into fists. Because of something I didn't even know I had. They died because of fear, Kale said quietly. Not because of you. Alara stood, her voice resolute. I need to know who did this. I need to know why. Kale studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. We'll find the truth. Together. As Alara stared out at the horizon, determination burning in her chest, Kale made a silent vow. No one would harm her. Not while he still drew breath. Not while there was still a chance to heal what centuries had broken. They came for her at twilight. Alara was walking through the eastern corridor, returning from the library, when 3 figures stepped from the shadows. Vampires, tall and pale, their eyes glowing with cold crimson light. They wore the dark armor of castle guards, but their expressions held no loyalty, only hostility. Alara win, the tallest one said, his voice sharp as broken glass. You don't belong here. Alara's heart lurched. She took a step back. Lord Kale granted me sanctuary. Lord Kale is mistaken. The vampire moved closer, his presence suffocating. You are a threat to this kingdom, a danger to our kind. I've done nothing. You exist, another hissed. That's enough. The shadows along the walls began to writhe, darkening, stretching like grasping fingers. The torches flickered violently, their flames turning from warm gold to icy blue. Alara's breath quickened. Please. I don't want trouble. Then leave, the first vampire said coldly, before you bring ruin upon us all. The corridor grew colder. The shadows thickened, crawling across the floor, up the walls, twisting into shapes that seemed almost alive. Alara felt the air pressing in on her, felt the weight of their hatred, their fear. And something inside her snapped. A warmth bloomed in her chest, sudden, bright, overwhelming. She gasped, pressing a hand to her sternum. Golden light flickered beneath her skin, pulsing outward in soft ripples. The shadows recoiled. The vampires froze, their eyes widening in shock as the golden flares spread through the corridor, calming the restless darkness, brightening the torches, warming the air. What is she doing? One whispered. Stop her. But before they could move, a low, primal growl echoed through the hallway. Kale appeared at the end of the corridor, and the air itself seemed to tremble. His eyes blazed crimson, brighter than Alara had ever seen. His presence expanded, filling the space with suffocating power. The shadows that had retreated from Alara now bent toward him, swirling around his form like a living cloak. You dare threaten her? His voice was no longer calm. It was ancient, terrible, edged with barely restrained fury. The three vampires dropped to their knees immediately, heads bowed. My lord, we only... Silence. The word cracked through the air like thunder. Kale moved forward, and the shadows moved with him, darkening, deepening. The temperature plummeted. Frost crept across the stone walls. The torches guttered and nearly went out. Alara felt the overwhelming weight of his power, raw, devastating, inhuman. This was the vampire king the legend spoke of. This was the monster that kingdoms feared. But she also saw something else. Beneath the fury, beneath the power, there was pain. Control slipping. Corruption rising. He was losing himself. Without thinking, Alara stepped forward. Kale. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the darkness. She reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. The effect was instantaneous. The shadows stilled. The cold receded. The crimson blaze in Kale's eyes softened, dimming to their usual glow. He turned his head sharply, staring at her as if waking from a nightmare. The entire corridor went silent. The three vampires stared in disbelief. Guards who had rushed to the scene stood frozen, their weapons half-drawn. No one moved. No one breathed. Alara kept her hand on Kale's arm, her touch steady, her golden light still faintly glowing beneath her skin. It's all right, she whispered. I'm safe. Kale's jaw tightened. His fists slowly unclenched. The darkness around him dissolved like smoke. He looked down at her hand on his arm, then back at her face. Something flickered in his expression. Shock, realization, vulnerability. She had calmed him, pulled him back from the edge. He took a slow, steadying breath. Then he turned to the three vampires still kneeling on the floor. Leave, he said quietly. Now. They scrambled to their feet and fled. Kale's gaze swept over the gathered guards. Return to your posts. All of you. They bowed and dispersed without a word. Only Alara remained. Kale stood motionless for a long moment, staring at the place where her hand had been. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost shaken. You stopped me. Alara withdrew her hand, suddenly self-conscious. You were losing control. I haven't lost control in 2 centuries. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something fragile in his eyes. But you brought me back. I didn't do anything. You did everything. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken understanding. Finally, Kale exhaled slowly. Come with me. He led her up a spiraling staircase, higher and higher, until they reached the topmost tower of the citadel, the moonlit observatory. The chamber was open to the night sky, its domed ceiling made entirely of enchanted glass. Stars blazed overhead, impossibly bright, their light reflected in pools of still water set into the floor. Telescopes pointed toward the heavens, and ancient star charts hung along the walls. It was breathtaking. Alara stepped to the edge of the platform, gazing out at the vast expanse of the northern realm, snow-covered mountains, endless forests, distant villages glowing faintly in the dark. Kale stood beside her, his hands resting on the stone railing. "I come here when I need to remember," he said quietly, "that the world is larger than the darkness, that there are things still worth protecting." Alara looked at him. "Do you feel it often? The corruption?" "Every day." His voice was matter-of-fact, but there was an ache beneath it. "It's part of what we are. Immortality comes with a cost. The longer we live, the harder it becomes to hold on to ourselves." "And I can stop it?" Alara asked softly. Kale turned to her. "You already have." For a long moment, they simply stood together, the stars watching over them in silence. "I don't understand any of this," Alara admitted. "Why me? Why now?" "I don't know," Kale said, "but I'm grateful you're here." Alara's breath caught. She looked up at him, and something passed between them, something unspoken, fragile, and undeniably real. "Thank you," she whispered, "for protecting me." Kale's expression softened. "Always." Deep within the citadel, in a shadowed chamber far from prying eyes, the dark faction convened once more. "She's growing stronger," one said, their voice tight with frustration. "She's making him weaker," another countered. "He defied the council for her. He nearly lost control in the corridor. She will unravel everything we've built. Then we remove her, quietly, permanently. And if Lord Kale discovers, he won't. Not if we're careful." A figure at the head of the table leaned forward, their face hidden in shadow. "We act before the week's end. Before she binds herself to him completely. And if she resists," the figure's lips curved into a cold smile, "then we ensure she doesn't survive long enough to become a problem." The others nodded in grim agreement. The plot was set, and Alara, standing beneath the stars with the Vampire King, had no idea the danger closing in around her. It happened during breakfast. Alara sat across from Lyric in the sunlit morning room, watching the child cheerfully dunk bread into honey while chattering about the snow fort she wanted to build. Kale stood near the window, his usual composed self, reviewing reports from his advisors. Everything was peaceful. And then Lyric gasped. Her small body went rigid. The bread tumbled from her fingers. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed forward onto the table. "Lyrics." Alara lunged across the table, catching the child before she hit the floor. Kale moved with inhuman speed, crossing the room in an instant. He swept Lyric into his arms, his face draining of color. "Lyric, Lyric, look at me." The child's body convulsed. Dark veins spread across her pale skin like ink seeping through parchment. Her breath came in shallow, rattling gasps. "Get the healers." Kale's voice cracked with desperation. "Now." Guards rushed from the room. Alara stood frozen, her heart pounding as Kale cradled his daughter, his hands trembling. "Stay with me," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Please stay with me." The healers arrived within moments, 3 vampire physicians in dark robes, their faces grim. They laid Lyric on a velvet chaise and began their examinations, their hands glowing with pale blue light as they traced the curse's path through her body. "It's blood magic," one muttered. "Ancient. Deliberate. Can you remove it?" Kale demanded, his crimson eyes blazing. "We're trying, my lord, but—" Lyric convulsed again, a strangled cry escaping her lips. The dark veins spread further, crawling up her neck, across her cheeks. "She's fading," another healer said, panic creeping into his voice. "The curse is consuming her life force. We can't." "Then find someone who can," Kale roared. The healers flinched but continued their work, their faces pale with fear. Spells were cast, potions administered, runes drawn in the air. Nothing worked. Lyric's breathing grew weaker. Kale dropped to his knees beside her, his hand gripping hers.
No.
No, you don't get to leave me. Do you hear me?
His voice shattered.
You're all I have. You're everything. Tears slipped down his face, something Alara had never imagined possible. The feared vampire king, centuries old, immortal, unshakable, was falling apart. Alara pressed a hand to her chest. Something was burning there, hot and insistent, pulling her forward. Let me try, she whispered. Kale's head snapped toward her.
What?
Let me try, Alara repeated, louder this time. She stepped forward, her hands trembling. I can feel it. The curse. It's calling to me. You don't know what you're doing, one of the healers protested. If you interfere. She's dying. Alara's voice cracked. Let me try. Kale stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. Then he stepped aside. Alara knelt beside Lyric, her hands hovering over the child's small body. The dark veins pulsed beneath her skin, writhing like living things. The curse was feeding, growing stronger with every heartbeat. Alara closed her eyes and pressed her palms to Lyric's chest. The burning in her own chest intensified, spreading through her veins like liquid fire. As she gasped, her body arching, but she didn't pull away. Golden light erupted from her hands. It poured into the Lyric in radiant waves, bright and blinding. The entire room was bathed in its glow. The healers shielded their eyes. Kale stood frozen, staring in awe and terror. Alara felt the curse latch onto her, felt it pull, clawing its way out of Lyric's body and into her own. It was agony, black, corrosive, suffocating. She screamed, but she didn't let go. The dark veins on Lyric's skin began to recede. Her breathing steadied. Color returned to her cheeks. But Alara's hands were now covered in black, writhing marks. The curse was consuming her instead. Alara, stop. Kale's voice was distant, panicked. You'll kill yourself. She couldn't stop. Wouldn't stop. Not until Lyric was safe. With a final, desperate surge, Alara pulled the last of the curse into herself. The golden light flared one last time, so bright it was nearly white, and then the curse shattered. The black marks dissolved into smoke and vanished. The light faded. Silence fell. Lyric's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at Alara with hazy recognition and smiled weakly. Alara. The child reached up with one small hand, her fingers brushing Alara's cheek. And then Alara's strength gave out. She swayed, her vision darkening. The last thing she felt was strong arms catching her before she hit the ground. Alara. Kale's voice was raw, desperate. Her head fell against his chest. Darkness claimed her. The room erupted into chaos. Healers rushed forward, but Kale was already lifting Alara into his arms. Prepare the recovery chamber. Now. My lord, the child. The Lyrics are safe. Kale's voice was steel. See her. He looked down at Alara's unconscious form, her face pale, her breathing shallow. She saved my daughter. Now I will save her. He carried her from the room without another word, moving swiftly through the corridors. Behind him, the healers exchanged stunned glances. The prophecy, one whispered. It's real. She pulled the curse from the child. She nearly died doing it. And Lord Kale. The eldest healer's voice was filled with wonder and dread. He looks at her as if she's the only light left in the world. In the recovery chamber, Kale laid Alara gently on the bed. Her skin was cold, her pulse faint. He sat beside her, his hand gripping hers, unwilling to let go. You stubborn, foolish woman, he murmured, his voice rough. Why would you risk yourself like that? She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. He pressed her hand to his forehead, his eyes closing. You saved her. You saved my daughter. His voice broke. How am I supposed to repay that? The door opened softly. Lyric, pale but steady, was carried in by one of the healers. The moment she saw Alara, she struggled free and ran to the bedside. Is she okay? Lyric's voice was small, frightened. Kale pulled his daughter close, his arm wrapping around her. She will be. She has to be. Lyric climbed onto the bed, curling up beside Alara. She took the woman's hand in both of hers. "Wake up, Alara.
Please.
I need you." Kale watched them both, his daughter and the woman who had become something he never expected. Something essential. Far below, in the shadows of the citadel, the dark faction gathered in furious disbelief. The curse failed. The luminary destroyed it. "She's stronger than we anticipated." "Then we use a blade next time," the leader hissed. "No magic. No spells. Just steel and silence. And if Lord Kale is blind to the danger, we will act tonight." The others nodded grimly. Alara's time was running out. Fire. Everywhere, fire. Alara ran through the smoke-choked hallway of her family's cottage, her lungs burning, her vision blurred by tears. Behind her, flames devoured everything. The drying herbs, the books of remedies, the wooden beams her father had carved by hand. "Mama," she screamed. "Papa." But the only answer was the roar of the inferno. She stumbled into the main room and froze. A figure stood amid the flames, untouched by the heat. Tall, cloaked in black, his face hidden beneath a hood. Silver runes glowed along his fingers, pulsing with dark magic. "You should have stayed hidden, little light," the figure said, his voice cold and smooth. "Your bloodline is a threat to everything we've built." "Who are you?" Alara gasped, backing away. "Someone who understands history." He stepped forward, and the flames parted around him like water. "The luminaries were extinguished for a reason. We cannot allow your kind to return." He raised his hand, and the fire surged toward her. Alara screamed and woke up. She bolted upright, gasping for air, her heart hammering against her ribs. It took several seconds for her surroundings to come into focus. She was in a large chamber, bathed in a soft firelight. Heavy curtains framed tall windows overlooking the snowy mountains. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft, piled high with silk blankets and furs. The air smelled faintly of cedar and night-blooming jasmine. This wasn't her room. A small weight shifted beside her. Alara looked down and found Lyric curled against her side, fast asleep, her blonde hair fanned across the pillow. One of the child's hands clutched Alara's sleeve, as if afraid she might disappear. "You're awake." Alara's head snapped toward the voice. Kale sat in a chair near the fireplace, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on her. He looked exhausted, his silver hair slightly disheveled, dark circles beneath his crimson eyes. He'd removed his coat, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. He'd been watching over her. "How long?" Alara's voice came out hoarse. She swallowed and tried again. "How long was I unconscious?" 2 days. Her eyes widened. 2 days. "You nearly died." Kale's voice was quiet, but edged with something raw. "The healers said the curse should have killed you when you pulled it into yourself. But you didn't let it. You fought it off." Alara looked down at her hands. The black marks were gone, but faint golden lines traced her palms, scars from the luminary energy she'd unleashed. "Lyric," she whispered. "She's fine. Completely healed." Kale's gaze softened as he looked at his sleeping daughter. "Because of you." Alara's throat tightened. "I couldn't just let her die." "I know." Kale stood and moved to the edge of the bed, his expression unreadable. "But you could have died instead." "Do you understand that?" "I understand," Alara said softly. "But I do it again." Kale stared at her for a long moment, something unspoken flickering in his eyes. Then he exhaled slowly and sat on the edge of the bed.
"What did you see?"
"While you were unconscious, you kept calling out, saying names, screaming." Alara's hands clenched in the blankets. "I saw the fire. The night my family died." She looked up at him, her voice trembling. "It wasn't an accident. There was a man, a vampire lord. He said my bloodline was a threat. He said the luminaries had to be extinguished." Kale's jaw tightened, his eyes darkening. "Did you see his face?"
"No."
"But I heard his voice, and I saw his runes." She held up her hand, tracing the pattern in the air with shaking fingers. "They looked like this." Kale's expression turned to stone. "I know those runes." "You do. They belong to House Draven." A family that served on my council. His voice dropped, cold and lethal, until I banished them for treason. Alara's breath caught. Then they hunted you. Kale rose abruptly, his hands clenching into fists. They slaughtered your family, and they've been hiding in the shadows ever since. Kale, they will answer for this. His voice was no longer calm. It was fury barely leashed. I swear it. The confrontation came at dawn. Kale summoned the entire court to the throne hall. Alara stood beside him, her heart pounding as nobles and advisors filed into the vast chamber. At the far end, 3 figures in dark robes were dragged forward by guards, members of the conspiracy that had tried to poison Lyric. Kale's voice rang out, cold and commanding. You stand accused of attempting to murder my daughter, of conspiring against the crown, and of harboring a known traitor, Lord Cadmus Draven. The room erupted in whispers. One of the accused, a tall vampire with graying hair, lifted his chin defiantly. We acted to protect this kingdom. The girl is a threat. Her very existence. Her existence saved my daughter's life, Kale interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade. While you plotted in the shadows, she risked everything. She is a luminary, the vampire spat. A relic of a failed bloodline. She will bring ruin. Enough. Alara's voice rang out, clear and steady. The hall fell silent. All eyes turned to her. She stepped forward, her hands trembling but her gaze unwavering. You're right. I am a luminary. I didn't ask to be.
I didn't want this.
Her voice grew stronger. But I won't hide anymore. I won't apologize for what I am. She turned to face the gathered court. My family was slaughtered because people like you feared what we could do. You burned our homes. You hunted us into extinction. And now you stand here, calling me the threat. The vampire conspirator sneered. You don't belong. She belongs here more than you do, Kale said coldly. He descended the steps of his throne, moving to stand beside Alara. She has proven her worth, her courage, her heart. He turned to the court. And I will not tolerate anyone who seeks to harm her. The guards moved forward, seizing the conspirators. Strip them of their titles, Kale commanded. Banish them from the northern realm. If they return, they will face execution. The conspirators were dragged away, their protests echoing through the hall. Kale turned to the remaining nobles. Let this be understood. Alara Wynn is under my protection. She is essential to the stability of this kingdom. Anyone who challenges this answers to me personally. No one dared speak. Later that night, Alara found Kale in the moonlit observatory. He stood at the railing, staring out at the stars. She approached quietly, stopping beside him. Thank you, she said softly, for defending me. You defended yourself, Kale replied. I merely ensured they listened. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Alara spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I'm afraid. Kale turned to her. Of what? Of what I'm becoming. Of what they expect me to be. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Kale's expression softened. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. You've already proven you are. But what if I fail? What if I? Then I'll be there to catch you. His voice was steady, certain. You're not alone, Alara. Not anymore. She looked down at their joined hands, warmth spreading through her chest. Why do you care so much? Kale was quiet for a long moment. Then he said simply, because you matter. To Lyric. To this kingdom.
He paused.
To me. Alara's breath caught. You're free to leave if you wish, Kale continued. I won't force you to stay. But if you choose to remain, you'll always have a place here. Alara looked up at him, at the ancient, immortal king who had shown her more kindness than anyone in years. I choose to stay, she whispered. Kale's hand tightened gently around hers. And beneath the endless stars, something shifted between them. Something neither had words for yet, but both felt deeply. A bond that couldn't be broken. A light in the darkness. The throne hall had never been so crowded. Every noble house in the northern realm had been summoned. Vampires in ornate gowns and embroidered coats lined the marble floors, their whispers echoing beneath the vaulted ceiling. Torches burned brighter than usual, their flames steady and warm, a subtle change that had not gone unnoticed since Alara's arrival. Alara stood at the base of the dais, her heart pounding. She wore a gown of deep silver, simple but elegant, gifted to her by Kale's attendants. Her hair was braided with threads of gold. She looked every bit the part of someone who belonged in this world. But inside, she still felt like the broken woman on the frozen steps. Kale sat upon his throne, regal and composed, his silver hair falling over his dark coat. Lyric stood beside Alara, her small hand gripping Alara's tightly, refusing to let go despite the formality of the occasion. The murmurs quieted as Kale rose. His voice carried through the hall, clear and commanding. I have gathered you here to acknowledge a truth that can no longer be ignored. His crimson gaze swept over the assembled court. The woman standing before you is Alara Wynn, last living descendant of the luminary bloodline. A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. She came to us broken, hunted, and alone. Kale continued. And in the weeks since her arrival, she has proven herself beyond measure. She saved my daughter's life. She calmed the shadows that have plagued these halls for centuries. She has brought light to a kingdom that had forgotten what light looked like. He descended the steps slowly, his eyes never leaving Alara's. She is not a prisoner. She is not a tool. She is a guest of this court, under my personal protection. And anyone who seeks to harm her will answer to me. Silence fell. Then, one by one, the nobles bowed their heads. Kale stopped before Alara, his expression softening. You have earned your place here, Alara Wynn. Not through power or prophecy, but through your courage and your heart. Alara's throat tightened. She looked out at the sea of faces. Vampires who had once feared her, mistrusted her, wanted her gone. Now, they watched with something closer to respect. Lyric tugged on her hand and whispered loudly, That means you're staying forever, right? A ripple of quiet laughter passed through the hall. Alara knelt down, meeting the child's eyes. If your father will have me. Lyric beamed and threw her arms around Alara's neck. He will. He already said so. Kale's lips twitched into a faint smile. My daughter speaks the truth. In the days that followed, the citadel changed. It was subtle at first. The shadows in the corridors grew softer, retreating into corners rather than creeping along the walls. The torches burned with steady warmth instead of cold blue flame. The oppressive weight that had lingered in the air for decades began to lift. Alara walked through the halls, and the castle responded. Ancient stones seemed to hum beneath her touch. The spirits that haunted the forgotten wings grew quiet, soothed by her presence. Even the eldest vampires, who had carried corruption in their blood for centuries, found themselves calmer, steadier. Healers whispered in awe. Advisors spoke of a golden age returning. The prophecy was no longer just words. It was unfolding before their eyes. But Alara felt the weight of it all. The expectations, the responsibility. And one evening, as she stood in the library staring out at the snow-covered mountains, Kale found her. You're troubled, he said quietly. Alara didn't turn. I don't know if I can be what they need me to be. Kale stepped beside her, his hands clasped behind his back. You already are. But what if I fail? What if the light fades, and I'm just broken again? Kale was silent for a moment. Then he said, Alara, look at me. She turned, meeting his crimson gaze. You have a choice, Kale said gently. You can return to the human world. I will give you gold, protection, passage to wherever you wish to go. You will be safe, free. Alara's breath caught. Or you stay here, with us. His voice softened. With Lyric. With me. Her heart pounded. And if I stay, then you become part of this family. Not because of prophecy or duty, but because you choose it.
Kale paused.
Because we choose you. Alara stared at him, emotions swirling in her chest. Fear, hope, longing. You're giving me freedom? I'm giving you a choice. Kale's eyes held hers. The one thing no one else ever gave you. Tears pricked at Alara's eyes. She looked past him, toward the doorway where Lyric had appeared, peeking around the corner with hopeful eyes. Alara smiled through her tears. I choose to stay. The snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, as the three of them stood outside the citadel's main entrance. It was late evening, the sky a deep indigo scattered with stars. The blue fires burned along the walls, casting flickering light across the courtyard. The world was quiet, peaceful. Lyric stood between Alara and Kale, bundled in her crimson coat, her cheeks rosy from the cold. She looked up at Alara with shining eyes. Can I hug you again? Lyric asked softly. Alara knelt down, opening her arms. Always. Lyric rushed forward, wrapping her small arms around Alara's neck. But this time, the hug felt different. It wasn't born of pity or sorrow. It was born of belonging, of love. I'm so glad you stayed, Lyric whispered. So am I, Alara whispered back. When they pulled apart, Kale stepped forward. He removed his crimson cloak, the same one he'd draped over her shoulders that first night, and placed it gently around her once more. You don't have to give me this every time it snows, Alara said with a faint smile. Then stop standing outside without a coat, Kale replied, his tone dry but warm. Alara laughed, a real, genuine laugh. It felt strange, foreign, but wonderful. Kale stood beside her, his presence steady and grounding. You are no longer the woman weeping on those frozen steps. Alara looked up at him. No.
No.
His voice was quiet, certain. You are Alara Wynn, luminary of the Shadowbane line, protector of my daughter. And, he paused, something vulnerable flickering in his eyes. Someone I am grateful to have found. Alara's breath hitched. She looked out at the snow-covered mountains, at the citadel that had become her sanctuary, at the little girl who had given her hope when she had none. And she realized something profound. The hug on the frozen steps hadn't just saved her life. It had given her a new one. A life where she wasn't broken or cursed or alone. A life where she was seen, valued, and loved. Thank you, Alara whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For everything. Kale's hand brushed against hers, their fingers intertwining.
No.
Thank you. Lyric grabbed both their hands, linking the three of them together. We're a family now, right? Alara looked at Kale. Kale looked at Alara. And for the first time in centuries, the Vampire King smiled, truly smiled. Yes, Kale said softly, we are. And as the snow continued to fall, painting the world in silver and white, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in years.
Peace.
Not because her pain had vanished, not because her past was erased, but because she had finally found a place where her brokenness was not a burden. It was a bridge, a beginning, a light in the darkness. And standing there, between the Vampire King and his daughter, beneath the endless northern stars, Alara Wynn realized that sometimes the most powerful magic wasn't cast through prophecy or destiny. Sometimes it was simply this, a hug.
A choice.
A family forged not by blood, but by love. And that, she thought, was the truest kind of magic there was. Months later, when travelers passed through the northern realm, they spoke of a curious change in the Shadowbane Citadel. The shadows no longer felt oppressive. The fires burned warm and golden. And sometimes, if you listen closely, you could hear the laughter of a little girl echoing through the halls. And if you looked up at the highest tower, you might catch a glimpse of two figures standing side by side beneath the stars, a silver-haired king and a woman wrapped in crimson, their hands intertwined. The darkness had not vanished, but the light had returned, and that made all the difference.